Why did Steven Spielberg choose to direct Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? Who's the uncredited writer who Spielberg said basically wrote all of the dialogue for the film? In what scene did Sir Sean Connery refuse to wear pants? These and more questions will be answered on
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
The hell you will. He's got a 2-day head start on you, which is more than he needs. Brody's got friends in every town and village from here to the Sudan. He speaks a dozen languages, knows every local custom. He'll blend in, disappear. You'll never see him again. With any luck, he's got the Grail already. Does anyone here speak English? Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 193rd episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that distinguished English gentleman who's standing out like a sore thumb about Back Look Cinema. Previously on Back Look Cinema, I said that this week we would take a look at The Running Man starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. But then I realized that we already talked about The Running Man. We did that episode already. So after searching and searching, I settled on finishing one of my favorite movie trilogies of the 1980s. That being Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Yes, I know that there are more recent Indiana Jones sequels. I'm not pretending that they don't exist. It's just that they didn't come out in the 80s. I covered the previous films a while ago. We talked about Raiders of the Lost Ark all the way back in episode 13 and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in episode number 83. Now, one of the major tropes about the Indiana Jones franchise is the copious use of the MacGuffin. You may hear film nerds talking about MacGuffin all the time. And for those of you who don't know, the term MacGuffin was coined by screenwriter Angus MacPhail and popularized for film by Alfred Hitchcock. It's a literary device that is used to move the plot along and develop the characters in the story. The MacGuffin is a person, place, or thing that both the protagonist and the antagonist are going after to achieve their goals. There are two general conceptions of what the MacGuffin should be. Alfred Hitchcock believed that the MacGuffin should be insignificant and not have any actual function in the story. That is, everybody is after it, but it doesn't actually do anything. Sometimes the object isn't even revealed, like the object in the suitcase at the end of Pulp Fiction. George Lucas believed differently. He thought that the MacGuffin should be integral to the story. In most of his films, like the stolen plans of the Death Star in 1977's Star Wars, the MacGuffin is ultimately used to defeat the antagonists. In the first 3 Indiana Jones movies, the MacGuffin actually kills the main bad guys, whether the evildoers misuse the MacGuffin or Indy used the MacGuffin to directly kill his main opponent. In the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade movie, I counted 6 MacGuffins. Each MacGuffin is part of a shorter plot point or a story, as like a really short story arc. So, for example, the first MacGuffin that we come across is the Cross of Coronado. It's a golden cross. It's a fancy gold cross. And he comes across it when he's a child. Well, he doesn't come across it. He comes across when he's I guess he's some kind of Boy Scout or some organization like that. He discovers that there are some men, they find the artifact on a dig that they're doing. And or at least Indiana assumes that they are getting the artifact for a profit. And Indiana is determined that this artifact belongs in a museum. So he steals it from them, but he ultimately loses it. And then years later, he tracks it down again and he steals it back, and he's able to donate it to a museum. The next MacGuffin is Indiana Jones. Well, Indiana Jones Sr. and his diary, the diary of Indiana Jones Sr. So this diary has important clues to where the main MacGuffin is, and they need to track the diary down to get those clues. This is pretty much throughout different parts of the movie. The next MacGuffin is the second marker. This is a place that they have to go to that is described in the diary of Indiana Jones Sr., or I should say Henry Jones. Henry Jones doesn't go by Indiana Jones. Anyways, so the second marker, it's the second marker to the Holy Grail. It's a knight's tomb, and the clue is on the shield of the knight that's in the tomb. And they have to go on this adventure to get to the second marker. And that's the third MacGuffin I found. The fourth MacGuffin is the map with no name. This is actually a part of the diary of Dr. Jones, the diary was one of the MacGuffins. And at some point, Indiana Jones takes the map out of the rest of the diary. And so now everybody's like the diary is passed along from hero to villain, and people are after that map. The next MacGuffin, after basically the bad guys get the map, is the Canyon of the Crescent Moon, because the map is pointing to the Canyon of the Crescent Moon. So that's the next MacGuffin. It's kind of like a soft MacGuffin. It's not a real huge adventure to get there, I don't think. They just kind of show up there. And then finally, the main MacGuffin is the Holy Grail. Them actually having to go through several ordeals in order to get to the Holy Grail itself. So those are the MacGuffins that I counted. Maybe I'm a little bit wrong. If you've seen this movie and you've paid attention to the other Indiana Jones movies, maybe I'm off on my MacGuffin count. What do you think? Let me know. So let us go now to the opening credits. In the years leading up to World War II, the Nazi political party completely dominated Germany, and to ensure their control over Deutschland and expand their influence all over the world, they would seek out supernatural artifacts that they believe would enhance their already considerable power. One such object was the legendary Ark of the Covenant, but they were foiled by a clever opponent. Later in 1938, they came close to capturing one of the most powerful supernatural objects in history, the cup that Jesus Christ of Nazareth drank out of at his Last Supper with his disciples, the same cup that was used to collect his blood during his crucifixion, the Holy Grail. The Germans captured the one man who could lead them to the Grail, Dr. Henry Jones Sr. The victory of the Third Reich seemed nearly assured, but they don't risk celebrating prematurely. There's one man who's consistently prevented the Nazis from acquiring holy objects, and that man came to rescue his father. That man was Dr. Henry Jones Jr., otherwise known as Indiana Jones. This movie was released May 24th, 1989, produced by Paramount Pictures and Lucasfilm. It grossed over $197 million in the U.S. and Canada, and over $474 million worldwide, on a reported budget of $48 million. Now, to account for inflation, if the movie was released today, it would have grossed $513 million in the U.S. and Canada, and the worldwide gross would be $1.2 billion, and the reported budget would be $125 million. So that is fantastic. It's surprising that they didn't make a sequel directly after this movie came out, because this made an insane amount of money. This movie starred Harrison Ford as Dr. Henry Jones Jr., also known as Indiana Jones. You may have seen him recently in Captain America: Brave New World, or you may have seen him in The Fugitive. We covered that in episode 13, and I talked with Ro from the Scarlet Scuttlebutt podcast about that fantastic movie. Obviously, you may have seen Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, or Air Force One, or Clear and Present Danger. All fantastic films. He's had a stellar career. Also having a fantastic career was Sir Sean Connery, playing Dr. Henry Jones Sr. And he's been in such distinguished movies like Dr. No, Highlander that we covered in episode 177, Finding Forrester, Entrapment, and The Rock, which I need to cover soon. Alison Doody played Dr. Elsa Snyder, and you may have seen her in A View to a Kill, Major League 2, RRR, or I guess some people call it Triple R. I'm not sure. That's a movie that I need to watch. I've heard people talk about it and they praise it, and I've yet to watch it. Denholm Elliott played Marcus Brody. He's been in A Room with a View, Trading Places, and Toy Soldiers. John Rhys Deves plays Sala, and you must have seen him in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. You may have heard his voice in Aquaman, and he's also been in a film that I had not heard about but is highly rated called Winter Thaw. Julian Glover played Walter Donovan. He's been in Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Troy, and you may have seen him in For Your Eyes Only. And the last actor I have on this list is River Phoenix. He played young Indy, and you may have seen him in My Own Private Idaho, or Stand By Me. We covered that in episode 136. I talked with Andy Heller from Fat Dude Digs Flicks. Or you may have seen him in Running on Empty. This movie was directed by Steven Spielberg, and he is definitely one of my favorite directors. Directed a lot of my favorite movies. Some of the movies that I have listed here, I've seen, and some I have not. For example, I've seen Schindler's List. I've seen E.T., the Extraterrestrial. But I haven't seen West Side Story, which I hear is good, The Post, Bridge of Spies, or Lincoln. I've heard all of those movies were good, but I hadn't gotten around to seeing them. This was written by Jeffrey Boehm, George Lucas, and Menno Meyjes. Boehm has written such movies as The Dead Zone, The Phantom, that's the superhero epic, Lethal Weapon 3, The Lost Boys, and Inner Space. Lucas is mainly known for Star Wars. So it's like Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, and it's kind of like Star Wars all the way down. But outside of Star Wars, he's also written American Graffiti and Willow. Meyjes, I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's written The Color Purple, The Siege, The Dinner, Ricochet, and a lot of other movies. This movie had music composed by John Williams, the classic. Or at least I should say he's done all the classics, such as Jurassic Park, Superman from 1979, or 1977. I can't remember when it came out, but it was the Christopher Reeve Superman, the Richard Donner Superman. He's also composed for War of the Worlds, Lincoln, Jaws, War Horse. It's just when you think of like the movies from the 1980s, you think of music by John Williams. And that's it for the opening credits. And as I'd like to, as I like to say, I invite everyone to check out backlickcinema.com/shop. And they can also, I'm still working on Bazaar de Alonso. It'll be a work in progress for a long time to come. And now let's go over to our favorite parts. So the themes of this movie, or the main theme, I should say, is not that hard to suss out. It's about family connection. So Indiana Jones is a little bit estranged from his father. It was just him and his father growing up. It's been insinuated or suggested that his mother and Dr. Jones' wife had passed away when Indy was very young. And so he has a kind of resentment against his father because it was just him and his father when he was growing up. But his father was more focused on archaeology, more focused on research and study, and not really giving his son the attention that his son wanted. And Indiana kind of held on to this resentment his entire life. So there's a sort of estrangement, and then when he's forced to go and rescue his father, there's an effort of reconciliation. There's like he's making an effort, because it's like Dr. Jones Sr. doesn't really see anything wrong with the relationship. Like he didn't think that he did anything wrong, and so he doesn't understand what his son is going through. He's having difficulty with empathizing with the needs of his son. But later on, by the end of the movie, I think he gets an inkling of what his son needs and starts to try to give Indiana the things that he needed that he couldn't give him before. So it's the themes of estrangement and reconciliation. In this segment, besides talking about some of my favorite parts, I'm going to talk about some of the things I noticed. I just like the way this story was put together. There are a lot of setups and callbacks in the story. There are lots of jokes in the story. I can't possibly cover them all, but I tried to take as many notes as I could as I was watching the movie. And because I really wanted to organize my thoughts about how I wanted to talk about this. So what's fun about this movie is that it's kind of talking about the origins of Indiana Jones, like where his name comes from, or where he got his adventurous spirit, where he got his outfit from. In the beginning of the movie, they're being chased by, like, they steal this artifact from these guys that were basically, what do you call it, trophy hunting, like tomb raiding. They were basically tomb raiding, and young Indiana Jones stumbles upon them, and he steals this artifact that they had dug up from the tomb, and he wants to get the artifact to a museum. And that was an exciting part. That was a great part. It was a great start to the movie. It basically starts off with a bang, essentially. There's a great chase sequence on the train. And what's neat about this is that when Indy and his friend, they're exploring the caves, and they come across these guys pillaging, and one of the guys, because they don't, as they open the movie, they're not telling you anybody's name. It's like mostly quiet. You see these Boy Scout troops and a couple of the Boy Scouts go into the mountains. You don't actually know who these kids are. And so you follow these kids and they discover these guys they look like they're pillaging for this artifact. And one of the guys looks like it's Indiana Jones. And the film like fools the audience, like, because the guy turns around and it's obviously not Indiana Jones. And that's when you realize that, that the kid is young Indiana Jones. So it's a nice way. It was a nice, cool way to fool the audience. And because the guy is dressed exactly like Indiana Jones, and until he turns around, it's like, oh, who is this guy? It's just some dude. It's just some dude that is pillaging, and they don't give him a name in the movie, but in the credits they call him Fedora, apparently because that is what he's wearing. After the chase, the Indy gets to his house, but then the sheriff shows up at his house demanding the artifact because Indy did in fact steal it. And if Indy didn't return the artifact, the guy would press charges and so on and so forth. And so the guy says to Indy, you lost this time, kid, but you don't have to like it. And the guy gives Indiana his fedora. And then there's a transition where the guy like covers Indiana's like whole head with the hat, and it's like he's looking down, and then it transitions to like years later when Indiana's an adult and he's wearing that same hat, and he looks up and you reveal the face of Indiana Jones as an adult. So that was a neat transition, but it was just like basically Indiana Jones got his identity from this random dude who is pillaging, right? It's kind of strange. I don't know if I would want to adopt the identity or the style of the dude that I was trying to stop doing this thing I thought was bad. That was kind of weird. That was one of the things I noticed. But it was neat. He was a very impressionable kid, apparently. I guess style conquers all. Like, yeah, I don't like what this dude is doing, but I love this dude's style, and I'm going to adopt it as my entire identity when I grow up. I think that's what we're doing here. In this early part, this is where he insists that the artifact belongs in the museum, and he kind of repeats that through the film about various things. And also, I think we hear him say something like this in Raiders of the Lost Ark, although I'm not sure. But what's kind of funny is that I'm not sure where Indy is getting this attitude from, because in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, he's not all that. He's basically a grave robber himself. He's a tomb raider, and he's raiding tombs for profit. He's not doing it for the betterment of society, or he's not doing it to take the artifacts to the museum. He's raiding ancient tombs for profit. And like throughout the film, he kind of learns that certain objects have significant cultural meaning to people, and not everything needs to be put in the museum, and not everything needs to be pillaged for profit. So this is Temple of Doom was supposed to show how Indy became selfless, but it's like in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, they forgot what happened in Temple of Doom, or they're ignoring the Temple of Doom and maybe rewriting Indiana Jones' history a little bit, because this movie is supposed to be kind of an apology for Temple of Doom, because Temple of Doom is supposed to be the prequel. In chronological order, it's Temple of Doom, where Indiana Jones is kind of selfish, and then there's Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's selfless and he's trying to protect ancient artifacts. And in the Last Crusade, in the beginning part of the Last Crusade, he's a child and he's selfless. Maybe in between when he was a child and Temple of Doom, he became more selfish. And then later on, he decides, and like in his adventures that he had in Temple of Doom, he recognized that selfishness is not the way to go, and he once again became selfless as he was when he was a child in the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That's a very long explanation. It's a very long thought process I had about him exclaiming that belongs in a museum. I had to think about that for a long time. Thank you for joining me on my thought journey. Also, in this beginning part, we get his fear of snakes, because in the beginning, he had no fear of snakes. He could hold a snake in his hand. He had no problem with snakes, none whatsoever. It was like he had a friend, and his friend was scared of snakes, and Indy picked up the snake and said, "It's just a snake," and he tossed the snake aside. Like laissez-faire. He has no fear of snakes. And then when he's being chased on this train chase, like he's on a train, he's running on the top of a train, he's being chased by the men who he saw pillaging. They're chasing him because he got this artifact. And then he falls through one of the roofs of one of the cars, and it happens to be the reptile car, because this is a circus train. And he falls into the reptile car of the circus train, and there are snakes everywhere, and they don't bother him so much, but he falls near this, it's like a bath or a tub or whatever filled with water. And this giant snake rears up out of the water, hissing. And then Indy is startled, and he falls into this giant bin of a bunch of snakes. And that's where he acquired his fear of snakes, which is totally understandable. Like when you fall into a tub and there's a giant snake there, like you'll freak out. And Indiana Jones freaked out, and he continued to freak out for the rest of his life over snakes. That's also one of my favorite parts. Another thing I noticed that I wanted to mention is that they had, like I said, there are a lot of callbacks, or there's a lot of setup and callbacks. So one of the setups is that when Indy is looking around his father's house, and he's looking for clues that the house is all ramshackle. He's looking for clues of where he can find his father. His father had mailed him his own diary. His diaries. So Dr. Jones Sr. needed to keep his diary safe, so he mailed it to Dr. Jones Jr. And while he's walking around his father's house, there's this painting. And on a painting, or a woodcut or something like that, it's a picture. And on the picture, it's like a giant pit. And you see at the bottom of the pit, you see a bunch of knights that are falling to the bottom of the pit. But then there's this one knight who looks like he's walking on thin air. And that is a clue, right? That's a clue for the end of the movie, because in the end of the movie, that's exactly what Indiana Jones has to do. He has to walk on thin air, or seemingly walk on thin air. And so I thought that was neat, that they kind of hid that clue in plain sight. And it's not something that you'd probably notice until you watch it a second time. Another setup and callback that I like, there's in the early part of the film, like this is after the first adventure where the adult Indy recovers this cross of Corazon or Coronado or whatever I said that thing was. After he's back in the classroom, he's teaching his class. And one of the things he's teaching his class is that archaeology is about studying. So it's about, you're not going to go on these vast adventures. X does not mark the spot. It never marks the spot. And you would be spending most of your time in libraries doing research. That's what the job calls for. So basically, he's trying to dampen any romantic notion that his students might have about what archaeology is really about. he's trying to tell them that they're not going to be going on any vast adventures. They're going to be studying in libraries. And then later in the film, like when he's on the search for the artifacts that he needs for the adventure, he ends up at a library, which he told his students, yeah, you're going to be doing a lot of research in the library. But they're, with the book that they have, with the diary that they have, the diary is giving them clues to what they're supposed to be looking for. And the diary points out Roman numerals, and they're in this library, and they're looking at the walls, and there's this glass, I forgot what you call it, the glass picture thing. I forgot what see, this is why doing a podcast alone, instead of having somebody that you can have a conversation with, this is why this is hard, because it's one of those glass fixtures that you see in churches, because this library used to be a church. They put, and there's a specific name for it, but I can't think of the name right now. I'm pretty sure that by now you know what I'm talking about. It's a window, but it's depicting a picture, depicting a religious scene. And in the picture, there's a Roman numeral, and then near the picture on columns, there's a Roman numeral. And so they're looking for the final Roman numeral. So the diary says that they should also see a Roman numeral 10, and that will show you where the next clue is. And Indy is looking around. They're all looking around. It's Indy, it's Marcus, it's Dr. Snyder. They're all looking around for this final Roman numeral. They're all thinking that it's like going to be a small Roman numeral 10 written on the wall or on a column somewhere. But then Indy gets inspiration, and he goes up the stairs. There's like an open stairway. He goes up the stairs to look down on the floor, and there's a giant Roman numeral 10 on the floor. And and he's like, "Oh, what do you know? Roman numeral 10. This is the Roman numeral that we're looking for." As it turns out, X really does mark the spot. And that's kind of like a callback to his students, that he was telling them where X never marks the spot. So that was pretty ingenious. I like the writing on that. Another one of my favorite scenes is the boat chase. There's a scene where Indy is trying to get away on a boat. He's being chased by some adversaries. Later on, they found out that these guys are actually trying to protect or keep hidden what they call the cup of Christ, or the Holy Grail. They're killing anybody who is close to discovering where the Holy Grail is. And these guys are harassing Indiana Jones. They're chasing him around the city, and because they're in Venice, they get on a boat and they're chasing them on the boat. And then, the way the fight ensues and the shenanigans that they get into, and then the fight ends when they're near because they're on like little boats, and they get near a ship, and on this ship there's a screw that propels the boat, but it's halfway out of the water, and it looks like a giant fan, and they get close to the giant propeller, and it starts chopping up the boat that they're both on, and Andy is threatened to kill them, or kill the dude, or maybe even kill them, both of them. He's threatening the dude. He's like, he's going to allow the giant boat propeller to, cut him to pieces. But the guy says, I'm ready for death. It's like, those guys are always scary. The ones that are ready for death are kind of scary. So the guy says that he's ready for death, and asks Indy if he was ready. And then after a conversation, Indy lets him go. But that boat chase was exciting. One of the funniest things that Indiana Jones says in the movie is, "Nazis. I hate these guys." And it kind of made me think that the way social media is at work now, it's almost like they are they'll try to censor the word Nazi to the point where people aren't actually saying Nazi anymore. They're saying not see. And so they'll put not see in their captions when they want to talk about Nazis. Because all of a sudden, for some reason, Nazis have become a taboo subject, at least on social media. And it's almost like when you tell people that you hate Nazis, is now there's pushback. Oh, why are you pushing back against hating Nazis? I don't know. Or else I do know, but it's like not even worth the conversation at this point. But it's refreshing to watch a movie from the 1980s where we all had the same opinion that Nazis were bad and we hate those guys. Like I said, there was a lot of funny moments in this movie. So there's a moment where Indiana Jones is trying to rescue his father, but during the rescue, they both get captured. And they're being held at gunpoint. And his father keeps calling him Junior, like Junior this, Junior that, obviously because he's Indiana Jones. Well, he's Henry Jones Jr. So his father calls him Junior all the time. And Indiana does not like being called Junior. He's always saying, Dad, stop calling me that. Stop calling me Junior. So they're being held at gunpoint, and his dad calls him Junior. And Indiana, in a fit of anger, charges the guy that the guy has a gun pointed directly at Jones, and he charges the guy with the gun, rips it from his hand, and then starts machine gunning all of the other guards that either didn't have guns or weren't prepared for him to start shooting at him. Kills all those guys. And then he says, I said, don't call me Junior. And his dad is in shock because his dad really is the type that is not built for adventure. And his dad says, look at what you did. You killed all those people. I thought that was so funny. Also, the dad has a great quote about zombies. I mean, not zombies, but Nazis. And his quote is, Nazi, the slime of humanity. And I have to say, I agree with that sentiment. I really love the part where Indy had given this speech about Marcus Brody. I had mentioned that when I opened the podcast, and how Indy tried to say that Marcus Brody would just disappear with the 2-day head start. And then you cut to Marcus Brody, and he's literally sticking out like a sore thumb. He's asking people if they speak English or maybe Greek. And I just thought that was funny. That was just a funny part. I really liked the tank fight that had happened near the end of the movie. In the tank fight, Indy and his crew are like staking out the area, and they happen upon the bad guys. They've got a column of horses and men, and they have a tank, and they need to rescue Indy's father and Marcus Brody that's inside the tank. So they while they're watching the tank, they get discovered. So there's a whole lot of running around going on, and all of a sudden, these guys that were protecting the cross, they show up. They start shooting the tank with their rifles, or shooting at all of the men in the column. They go in the offensive, but those guys get taken out rather quickly because it's a tank. And then they're chasing Indy. Indy is chasing them. It's a whole thing. It's a complex ballet of action and adventure that I really loved about that part. There are a lot of funny things that happen. There are a lot of funny moments, but the tank scene was just a magical ambrosia of joy and excitement. So it's definitely one of my favorite parts of the film. And then the last, well, not the very last, but one of the last things I wanted to talk about was the how the movie resolved itself. So they get to, or near the climax of the film. So the bad guys, like, it seems like in most Indiana Jones movies, the bad guys have the upper hand at the end of the film, and it seems like Indy and his crew are like they basically on the back foot. Like at the end of Indiana Jones and, well, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, like Indy and his companion are like tied to a stake, and the bad guys basically destroy themselves. And and the Temple of Doom, um, he actually manages to realize the power of the artifact that he carries, and he uses the artifact to kill the main bad guy. But had he not realized the power of the artifact, he would have lost that contest. He would have died. And then in this movie, him and his father and basically his whole crew are captured by the bad guys. What happened is that the clues to getting to the Holy Grail were written in the diary, but the bad guys don't have the diary, so they're just sending men down into the chamber, and the guys are getting cut up. And then Indiana and his crew, they see it, but somebody makes a noise, they're discovered, and now they're captured. And so the bad guys decide, and specifically Walter Donovan, he decides that Indiana Jones is going to be the next volunteer to go down to find the Holy Grail. He's going to send them through these booby traps to find the Holy Grail. And so Indiana Jones has a diary. He's using the clues that's in the diary, trying to figure it out. And I just liked how the booby trap works and how they constructed it was like a lot of juxtaposition of Indy going through the traps and repeating the clue to himself, and then it'll cut to Indiana Jones, well, I should say Henry Jones Sr., and Henry Jones Sr. is also reciting the clues. And what was most shocking about the film is that to get Indy to cooperate, they shoot his father. They give him like a gut shot. They shoot to wound him, but not to kill him. But it's the kind of wound that if he doesn't get immediate medical attention, that he would die. That's the only way they could get Indiana Jones to cooperate. So now Henry Jones Sr. is on the floor, dying, bleeding out from a gunshot wound. And Indiana Jones is basically risking his life in order to save his father, going through these booby traps, trying to figure out what these clues mean. So he figures out the first clue where he had to kneel so he wouldn't get cut up by these ancient buzzsaw booby traps. The second trial, I guess you could call them, was that he had to, I forgot what the actual clue was, but he had to believe in the name of God, or, he had to give honor to the name of God. And so there's this floor with a bunch of tiles on it. It has a bunch of letters. And so he has to step on the correct letters to spell out the name of God in order to cross these tiles. And the funny part on that was that the name that they had to use was Jehovah. And he said, Jehovah, J. And he's, but before he does that, it flashes to Henry Jones Sr. And Henry Jones Sr. says, but in the Greek alphabet, Jehovah, the J is an I. Jehovah starts with an I because the J is an I. And it's like he's wondering if his son remembers that. And he doesn't. His son doesn't remember that. He almost falls to his death stepping on the J. And he curses himself. He's like, damn it, I'm so stupid. It's in the Greek alphabet, Jehovah starts with an I. I think it was Greek. Anyways, he steps on the letter, spelling out the name of God, and he gets across. He goes to the third chamber, where he has to take basically a leap of faith. And it's like he's at a big chasm. Like this is just gigantic, huge chasm. And the clue is telling him that he has a leap, but there's no way that any human being can make this leap. It's like how do you get across this huge cavern? And the book says, you just have to have faith. So he closes his eyes, he steps off the cliff, and he ends up on a bridge that's slightly lower than the cliff. Like he falls on this bridge, and the bridge is constructed in such a way that it looks, from where Indy was standing, it looks like the rock face. So it looks like there's nothing there. It's an optical illusion that makes it look like it's thin air and the bridge is effectively invisible. But as you start to walk on a bridge, then your perspective changes and you can clearly see that it's a bridge. All of those are great. Then he gets into the chamber. And then all the while, Donovan is following him, because now that Indy has solved all the traps, Donovan can just basically waltz through, and he brings Dr. Elsa with her, because Dr. Elsa is a Nazi also. And so this leads to one of my favorite parts of the movie, where they go to, like, there's a knight there. The knight has been alive for over 700 years. They miraculously understand what the knight is saying, because like 1,000 years is the very limit to what we can understand English to sound like. Like after 1,000 years, English is practically a different language than the English we speak today. And this knight is 700 years old. So his English should be vastly different, but it isn't. It is. We all understand each other. So the knight, he's there to guard the Holy Grail from falling into the wrong hands. But it's not just a Holy Grail sitting there by itself. There's a bunch of cups there on this shelf. There just a whole bunch of cups there. And so Donovan is there. So he's looking for a cup, but he can't really figure it out. So he lets Snyder choose. And so she's looking around, she sees this golden cup, and like most of the cups are gold. And so she grabs this golden cup that looks pretty and gives it to him. And he goes to a nearby fountain and he dips the cup in the fountain, because when you drink from the cup, it's supposed to extend your lifespan. That's how the knight has been alive for 700 years, because he spent all that time drinking out of the Holy Grail to stay alive. So Donovan drinks it, and then his body starts to age. It ages rapidly. Like it does the exact opposite of extending his life. It ages him at a fantastic rate. And then he grabs onto Elsa. Elsa's just screaming. And then he's blown away as bones and dust. And as it turns out, Elsa intentionally misled him and gave him the wrong cup. And Andy starts looking for a cup. And he's looking for the cup that he chooses is the dullest, most basic cup that's in the whole collection. So he grabs it, he dips it in the water, and he drinks it because he urgently wants to use the cup to save his father. And he doesn't die. That was the test. If you drink of it and you don't die, then you chose wisely. And that's when Donovan drank from the cup and he died, the knight says he chose poorly. So that was funny. So Andy rushes the cup with some water in it back to his father, and he has his father drink the water and then pours the rest of the water on his father's wound where he had been shot. And the bullet disappears, the wound disappears, and Dr. Jones appears as if he's never been shot. My last favorite part that I want to talk about is the relationship between Indy and his dad. It was like they had fantastic chemistry. It's shocking that Harrison Ford and Sean Connery hadn't did more movies together, because they were great on screen together. A lot of people who have talked about this film commented on how that relationship felt real and genuine and authentic, and it was just a great story to tell of them trying to like reconcile their relationship or try to fix what was broken about their relationship. There's one point where they're on a dirigible and Indiana Jones complains how his father just didn't talk to him when he was growing up. And so Henry Jones, he was trying to read his notes. And so with Henry trying to read his notes and Indiana just pestering about being neglected as a child, Henry gives up. He puts his book down and says, okay, let's talk. What do you want to talk about? Let's talk. And Andy is so shocked. He doesn't even know what to talk about. He's like a little kid again. It's almost like he's paralyzed because he can't think of the thing that he needs to talk about to his father. He doesn't know. It's a moment like that are throughout the film between father and son. And that it was like an emotional glue that an action film like this needs. And in order to be successful, I think that relationship made this movie into a successful movie. It's something that the other films really didn't have. They didn't really have a relationship like this. So I thought it was fantastic. So those are my favorite parts. What are some of your favorite parts? What did you like about this movie? What did I skip over that you liked, that you would have wanted me to talk about that I didn't? Let me know. And I'll give you the email address where you can write to me, or you can, I guess, check me out on social media, leave a comment there as well. So that's it for some of my favorite parts. And now we'll head on to the top 10 trivia. So the trivia top 10, most of these, or practically all of these, I got from IMDb. So let's see what they were able to dig up. As with the other Indiana Jones movies, Harrison Ford did many of his own stunts. According to stuntman Vic Armstrong, he had to pull Ford aside and ask him to let him do some work because Ford was doing so much of the action himself. Armstrong later said, if he wasn't such a great actor, he would have made a really good stuntman. So, on the slide, Harrison Ford is one of those guys that does a lot of his own stunts. Maybe not as many as like Tom Cruise or Jackie Chan, but he'll get some of his stunt work in. Most of the uniforms worn by the Nazis in the Berlin book burning scene were authentic World War II uniforms, not replicas. A cache of old uniforms was found in Germany and obtained by costume designer Anthony Powell to be used in this movie. So that was amazing. I wonder what they did with the uniforms after the movie. Did they burn the uniforms? Because they probably should have. Harrison Ford nominated River Phoenix to play him as a teenager, having worked with him before on his favorite of his many movies, The Mosquito Coast from 1986. When describing how he prepared for playing the role, Phoenix explained that he didn't really base his portrayal on the Indiana Jones character, but on Harrison Ford. So he observed Ford out of character before acting his part. That's an interesting way of going about it. The 4 horses in the final scenes outside of the temple were loaned to the movie personally by King Hussein of Jordan. So at the end of the movie, they were literally riding on royal horses. Steven Spielberg is on record as saying he made this movie for 2 reasons. 1, to fulfill a 3-movie obligation he had made with George Lucas, and 2, to atone for the criticism that he received for the previous installment, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Because in that movie, there was a lot of criticism for how dark it was, how bloody it was, some of the body horror that was in the movie. So there was that. I loved all of that stuff. I loved the body horror. I loved the bloodiness. I think what really attracted me to the movie was Short Round. I was around the same age as Short Round was, so I felt like I was in the movie. He was like my avatar in the movie. So that's why I really enjoyed Temple of Doom. For the scene at the Nazi rally in Berlin, where Indiana, Harrison Ford, confronts Elsa, Alison Doody, and steals back the diary, Steven Spielberg had all of the extras who did the Nazi salute simultaneously put their other arms behind their backs and cross their fingers. So I guess having to film a bunch of Nazi scenes that Steven Spielberg was feeling some kind of way. Sir Sean Connery and Harrison Ford wore no trousers during the shooting of the entire Zeppelin sequence. It was filmed in a very hot studio, and Connery didn't want to sweat too much. And if you know anything about Sean Connery, he will not wear an entire costume if he doesn't have to. Like if he's just shooting from the neck up, you're lucky that he has any clothes on at all. 2,000 rats were bred for the production. Breeding them specially was necessary, as ordinary rats would have been riddled with disease. Sounds like a wise thing to do. Also, there were a lot of rats there. I was wondering where they got all these rats from, and they were specially made for the movie. Anthony Powell found it challenging to create Sean Connery's costume because the script required the character to wear the same clothes throughout the movie. Powell thought about his own grandfather and incorporated tweed suits and fishing hats. Powell felt it necessary for Henry to wear glasses, but did not want to hide Connery's eyes, so chose rimless ones. He could not find any suitable, so he had them specially made. So Connery had the privilege of wearing custom-made glasses. The last bit of trivia: Sir Tom Stoppard was paid $120,000 to rewrite dialogue, specifically the lines for Henry and the Henry-Indiana exchange. After this movie's release and subsequent success, he was paid another $1 million as a bonus. In The Last Crusade, an oral history, an article published in Empire magazine in 2006, Spielberg said about the junior and senior conversations, "It was an emotional story, but I didn't want to get sentimental. Their disconnection from each other was the basis for a lot of comedy, and it gave Tom Stoppard, who was uncredited, a lot to write. Tom is pretty much responsible for every line of dialogue." So that's it for the trivia. I hope I was able to bring you something that you didn't know about. Let me know in the comments. And now, let's check out what the critics thought. The critics gave it 84%. Audience has it at 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb Reviews has it at 8.2 out of 10. Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times wrote, "As I watched it, I felt a real delight because recent Hollywood escapist movies have become too jaded and cynical, and they have lost the feeling that you can stumble over astonishing adventures just by going on a hike with your scout troop." And I'm not sure about like the movies that he's talking about that have lost their escapism. He was talking about the recent Hollywood movies at the time. But all I can say is, yes, this was a real feel-good movie. Eleanor Ringo Cater from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote, "The Last Crusade is long on special effects, amazing stunts, and cute father-son quips. It's short on romance, mystery, and cliffhanger chills." To which I would say, does it need that? Does it need the romance? Does it need... Well, it has mystery. I don't see how it's short on mystery, but does it need the cliffhanger chills? I I don't know. I can't say I agree with this. Danielle Solzman from Solzy at the Movies wrote, following the second outing, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is able to recapture the magic that made us fall in love with Indiana Jones. And that is correct. Gene Sisco from Chicago Tribune wrote, this is not so much a bad film as a machine-like one lacking the same energy as the original, which it most resembles. I can't say I agree with Gene Sisco. Famously, the co-host with Roger Ebert in the show called At the Movies. I don't see what he's talking about. I can't empathize with him on this point because he's not saying it's a bad movie, but I guess to him it felt formulaic, and I didn't feel that at all about this movie. Finally, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is, as of this recording, available on Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, and Pluto TV. The next movie I made sure to check out before I had put it on the schedule. I wanted to make sure that I hadn't covered it already. I talked about the sequel to this movie with Luke Ferris, and he's currently the host of the Least Important Things podcast. But I hadn't talked about the first movie in the franchise, which is a film adaptation of a very popular novel and another Spielberg classic. Join me next time for Jurassic Park. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe. Show movie from yesteryear from your loved ones. Hug your family. And if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.